Kneeling at the small headstone marked Baby Morrison, the CEO's grief shattered when a familiar voice whispered, "That grave is empty." He turned to see his former maid holding two boys with his exact smile. As memories flooded back through the amnesia, his trembling hands reached for the family he never knew existed. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Maya Johnson's fingertips traced the leather-bound spine of Disrupting Markets, careful not to leave smudges on the glossy cover. She shouldn't be touching Mr. Morrison's books. Mrs. Morrison had made that abundantly clear during her first day at the mansion 3 months ago. But standing alone in the vast library of the Morrison estate, surrounded by knowledge that cost more than her yearly salary, the temptation was irresistible. Planning a career change? The voice startled her, deep and amused. Maya nearly dropped the book, fumbling to return it to its precise position on the mahogany shelf. "Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry. I was just dusting and—" Blake Morrison leaned against the doorframe, his tailored suit emphasizing broad shoulders, green eyes studying her with undisguised interest. At 32, the CEO of Morrison Enterprises carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. "Please, it's Blake, and don't apologize for curiosity." He crossed the room, retrieved the book she'd hastily replaced. "Business strategy interests you?" Maya clutched her cleaning cloth tighter. "I'm studying computer science at Boston Community College. Night classes." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps even respect. "Ambitious for a—" He caught himself. "For a maid?" Maya finished, lifting her chin slightly. Blake laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "I was going to say, for someone working 2 jobs, impressive time management." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "What's your focus?" "Programming, software development." Maya took a small step back, aware of the impropriety. She needed this job. The Morrison paycheck covered her tuition and the tiny apartment she could barely afford. "You should borrow it." Blake extended the book toward her. "Consider it professional development." Their fingers brushed during the exchange. Maya felt a jolt that had nothing to do with static electricity. Mrs. Morrison might not. "It's my library." His smile turned conspiratorial. "Our secret." 3 weeks later, Maya found herself in the west wing of the mansion, a part of the house she rarely cleaned. Blake had left a note with her supervisor, something about needing help organizing papers in the rarely used guest suite while his wife Rebecca was in Washington with her father, the senator. "I've been watching you," Blake said, closing the door behind her. No papers waited on the antique desk. "Sir?" Maya's heartbeat quickened. "The way you move through this house, like you're memorizing everything, planning something." He approached slowly. "You're different from the others my mother hires. There's something exceptional about you." Maya knew she should leave. "I should get back to my regular duties. I've read your essays." She froze. "What?" "The ones you write on your laptop during lunch breaks, left open yesterday." His expression softened. "Your analysis of emerging markets in tech is more insightful than half my Harvard MBA graduates." Anger and flattery battled within her. "You had no right to have dinner with me tomorrow." "Not a question." "You're married," Maya said flatly. Blake's smile didn't waver. "I'm offering mentorship, career guidance, nothing inappropriate." They both knew it was a lie. "Focus on diversification," Maya suggested, tracing the financial report spread across Blake's desk. It was their 5th mentorship meeting in the West Wing. Rebecca was in Europe this time, something about a charity gala. Blake wasn't looking at the report. His gaze traced the curve of her neck, the way her uniform stretched across her shoulders. "You're wasted cleaning floors." "It's temporary." Maya straightened, creating distance. 2 more years of school, then." His kiss caught her mid-sentence. She should have pushed him away. Instead, her fingers tangled in his hair, years of loneliness, and the intoxication of being truly seen by someone like him overwhelming her better judgment. "I've wanted to do that since you corrected my market projection math," he murmured against her lips. Later, as clothing scattered across expensive carpet, Maya told herself this was just another kind of education, a worldly experience, nothing that would complicate her carefully planned future. She was wrong. Another exotic adventure with the help? Evan Matthews raised his whiskey and mock toast. "You're playing with fire, Morrison." Blake adjusted his tie, scanning the exclusive Boston club where Boston's elite conducted their real business. "She's different. Brilliant, actually. You should see her code." James Parker snorted. "I'm sure her code is what keeps you coming back." "How's Rebecca handling the IPO preparation?" Evan steered the conversation back to safer territory. "Must be stressful. She's focused on the senator's re-election campaign. Barely notices I'm working late." Blake signaled for another round. "Maya's just a temporary distraction. Something different." "They always are," James smirked, "until they want more than you're offering." Maya stared at the plastic stick in the dormitory bathroom, the second pink line unmistakable. Her roommate Tasha hovered anxiously. "Maybe it's a false positive?" Tasha offered weakly. Maya shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "Third test this week. What will you do?" The question echoed in the small, tiled room. Maya had mapped her entire future. Degree in 2 years, entry-level position at a tech firm, eventually her own startup. A child with a married man, her employer, featured in none of those plans. "I have to tell him," she whispered. Tasha squeezed her shoulder. "Are you sure that's wise?" Maya wasn't sure of anything anymore except the growing evidence of a choice she couldn't undo. Autumn sunlight streamed through the library windows as Maya closed the heavy door behind her. Blake looked up from his desk, irritation at being interrupted dissolving when he recognized her. "Maya, this is unexpected." His smile faltered when he noticed her pallor. "Everything all right?" Her hands trembled as she approached his massive mahogany desk. The pregnancy test felt like it was burning through her pocket. "We need to talk." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Blake leaned back, instantly guarded. "I'm rather busy. The IPO filing. I'm pregnant." The words hung between them, irrevocable. The transformation in his expression was immediate and complete. The warmth she'd grown accustomed to vanished, replaced by something clinical and assessing. A businessman confronted with an unexpected liability. "You're certain it's mine?" His voice was perfectly controlled. The question struck like a physical blow. "How can you ask that? You know there's never been anyone else." Blake rose slowly, circling his desk with deliberate steps. He opened a drawer, extracted a checkbook bound in leather as fine as his shoes. "People like you always have a plan B, don't they? How much to resolve this problem?" Maya stepped back, bile rising in her throat. "It's not a problem, Blake. It's our child." "There is no our here, Maya." He gestured at the space between them, pen poised above the checkbook. "There's you, a domestic worker with no qualifications, and there's me, about to take my company public. Do you really believe there's a future where we share anything?" He laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the book-lined room. "You're too boring, too ordinary for my world. Women like you are for cleaning, not for building legacies." Each word carved itself into Maya's memory, the casual cruelty more devastating than shouting would have been. She stood perfectly still, determined not to break in front of him. "Your mother thought I was good enough to raise her grandchild," she finally managed. Blake's expression hardened further. "My mother will handle this appropriately. She always does." The knock came at 7 the next morning. Maya had barely slept, eyes swollen from crying. She opened the door to her small quarters at the back of the estate to find Eleanor Morrison standing there, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. "My son told me about your situation." The older woman's voice was as crisp as her linen blazer. She extended a cream envelope. "Here's your severance and termination letter. The Morrisons handle their problems discreetly." Maya accepted the envelope with numb fingers. "Mrs. Morrison, There's $10,000 inside. Use it to start fresh somewhere else." Eleanor's expression softened fractionally. "And forget any fantasy about being part of this family." By noon, Maya had packed her meager belongings into 2 plastic bags. The security guard escorted her to the service gate, careful not to let her near the main house. As the wrought iron closed behind her, Maya looked back at the mansion where she'd foolishly believed someone like Blake Morrison could see her as an equal. 3 weeks later, Maya huddled in the corner of a downtown shelter, trying to calculate how long the Morrison money would last. Without references, securing another domestic position proved impossible. Her 3 new jobs, morning waitress, afternoon store clerk, night cleaner, barely covered rent on the tiny room she'd found in Dorchester. "Johnson, you've got 15 minutes before checkout." The shelter supervisor's voice cut through her calculations. Maya nodded, gathering her backpack. 4 hours of sleep between shifts was becoming normal. Her body ached constantly, the pregnancy sapping what little energy her fragmented rest provided. The diner where she worked mornings was half empty when she arrived. Maya tied her apron with practiced efficiency, ignoring the nausea that had become her constant companion. "Table 6 needs coffee," her manager barked. Maya grabbed the pot, moving between tables with mechanical precision. She'd learned to smile through exhaustion, to ignore the ache in her swollen feet. "Aren't you the maid who tried to trap the Morrison boy?" The whispered question from a woman at table 8 froze Maya mid-pour. She recognized the customer, one of Rebecca Morrison's friends who'd visited the mansion. The woman smirked, nudging her companion. "Thought so. Some people have no shame." Maya completed her shift with rigid dignity, then vomited in the alley behind the restaurant. The doctor at the free clinic had warned about stress affecting the pregnancy, but what choice did she have? That night, in her rented room with peeling wallpaper and unreliable heat, Maya collapsed onto the narrow bed. Her phone displayed a news alert: Morrison Enterprises stock projection rising ahead of their anticipated IPO. Blake's smiling face appeared beside the headline, arm around Rebecca at some charity function. As she curled around her still flat stomach, Maya felt the faintest flutter within. Too early for real movement, probably just her imagination. Still, it sparked something fierce and protective inside her. "I promise," she whispered to the darkness, "you'll never know the rejection I've known." Her hand pressed against her abdomen. "And someday, we'll look at Blake Morrison not from below, but from above. Not for revenge, but because we deserve more than he ever imagined." While tears dried on her face, Maya couldn't possibly know that in 10 years, the greatest technology CEOs would compete for 5 minutes of her time, and Blake Morrison would be merely a footnote in her extraordinary success story. While tears dried on her face, Maya couldn't possibly know that in 10 years, the greatest technology CEOs would compete for 5 minutes of her time, and Blake Morrison would be merely a footnote in her extraordinary success story. The morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains of Maya's rented room in Dorchester. 3 job applications lay rejected on her small table, all positions she was qualified for, all citing insufficient references as the reason for denial. The real reason remained unspoken. No one wanted to cross the Morrisons by hiring their discarded maid. Maya pressed her palm against her still flat stomach. "Just us against the world, little one," she whispered, forcing herself up from the narrow bed. The dizziness hit immediately, a wave of nausea that sent her rushing to the bathroom, where she emptied what little remained in her stomach from yesterday's meager dinner. 2 hours later, Maya stood behind the counter at Rosie's diner, forcing a smile as she refilled coffee cups. Her uniform, one size too large to hide her eventual pregnancy, hung awkwardly on her frame. "Order up for table 7, shouted Carlo, the short-order cook. Maya balanced the heavy plates on her arm, the smell of fried eggs making her stomach turn. She'd learned to breathe through her mouth during morning shifts. "This isn't what I ordered," complained the businessman at table 7, barely looking up from his phone. "I asked for egg whites only." "I'm sorry, sir. I'll fix that right away." Maya gathered the plate, adding it to her growing list of missteps today. 3 hours into her shift, and her tip jar contained exactly $4.37. By noon, Maya dragged herself to her second job at Discount Fashion, a clothing store in downtown Crossing where she organized racks and assisted customers until 6. Her manager, a perpetually dissatisfied woman named Greta, watched her with narrowed eyes. "You're moving too slow today, Johnson. We have a new shipment that needs to be on the floor by closing." Maya nodded, swallowing the retort that burned in her throat. Her feet throbbed in cheap sneakers, her lower back a constant ache from standing since 5 that morning. "And for God's sake, try to look more presentable. You're scaring away the customers with those circles under your eyes." The irony wasn't lost on Maya. Greta expected her to look fresh and energetic while paying her barely above minimum wage. She smoothed her hands over the discount store uniform, thinking of the designer clothes she used to launder at the Morrison estate. At 6:30, Maya gulped down a protein bar in the 10 minutes she had between jobs, then hurried to the downtown office building where she cleaned until midnight. The chemical smell of industrial cleaners made her nausea worse, but the night cleaning job paid $2 more per hour, money she couldn't afford to refuse. "Johnson, you're on bathroom duty tonight," announced the supervisor, handing her a mop and bucket. "6th floor had some kind of executive party. It's a mess." The executive bathrooms on the 6th floor gleamed with marble and brass fixtures, a stark contrast to the dingy staff restrooms on the ground floor. Maya cleaned methodically, trying not to think about the irony of scrubbing toilets used by people like Blake Morrison. While disinfecting the countertops, a wave of dizziness stronger than any before washed over her. Maya gripped the edge of the sink, watching the room spin. When her vision cleared, she forced herself to continue, one surface at a time. The stairs to the 7th floor proved too much. Halfway up, carrying her bucket and supplies, darkness edged into her vision. Maya reached for the railing but missed, the world tilting sideways as she collapsed. "Miss? Miss? Can you hear me?" Maya blinked, disoriented. A woman in a cleaning uniform knelt beside her, concern etched on her face. "I'm calling an ambulance," the woman said, already dialing. "No! No ambulance!" Maya protested, struggling to sit up. "I can't afford it." "You fell down half a flight of stairs. You're pregnant, aren't you?" Maya's hand instinctively went to her stomach. "How did you—" "I've had 3. I recognize the signs." The woman, her name tag read Gloria, helped Maya to a sitting position. "Listen to me. You need to see a doctor. There's a free clinic on Harrison Avenue that stays open late. I'll cover your floors. Go." 2 hours later, Maya sat on an examination table at the clinic, clutching the edge with white knuckles as the doctor performed an ultrasound. "You're severely dehydrated and showing signs of exhaustion," the doctor said, eyes on the monitor. "And—" She paused, adjusting the wand on Maya's abdomen. "Well, this explains some of your extreme symptoms. Is something wrong?" Fear clutched at Maya's throat. The doctor turned the monitor. "Nothing's wrong. You're carrying twins." Maya stared at the screen, at 2 tiny, fluttering heartbeats. "Twins?" "Yes, which means you absolutely cannot continue working 3 jobs with 4 hours of sleep. Your body is supporting 3 lives now, not just 2. Outside the clinic, Maya sat on a bench, discharge papers clutched in her trembling hands. The doctor's warnings echoed in her mind. Bed rest recommended, proper nutrition essential, stress reduction critical, all luxuries she couldn't afford. The following week passed in a blur of nausea and fatigue. Maya reduced her hours at the diner but picked up extra shifts cleaning offices. The math was simple and brutal. Fewer hours meant less money meant potentially no apartment. "You look like hell," said Gloria bluntly when they crossed paths in the office building's supply closet. "Did you see the doctor?" "Twins," Maya replied, the word still foreign on her tongue. Gloria's expression softened. "Jesus. And you're still working 3 jobs? The father isn't helping?" Maya's silence was answer enough. "Some men should be castrated," Gloria muttered. "Listen, my sister runs a program for single mothers. They might be able to help with housing assistance at least." 2 days later, Maya entered Richardson's, an upscale restaurant in Back Bay where she'd never have been able to afford a meal. She'd been assigned to serve a private party, extra money she desperately needed. The private dining room buzzed with Boston's elite. Maya moved efficiently between tables, face carefully blank as she poured wine and served appetizers. She'd nearly completed her circuit when a familiar laugh froze her in place. James Parker, one of Blake's closest friends, sat at the center table, surrounded by the same group she'd seen visit the Morrison estate. Maya turned quickly, hoping to remain unnoticed, but it was too late. "Wait, aren't you Morrison's maid? The one who tried to trap him?" James's voice carried across the room. The conversation dimmed. Maya felt eyes traveling from her face to her midsection, which had begun to show despite her attempts to hide it. "I believe you're mistaken, sir," she said, professional smile firmly in place. "No, I'm not. Blake told us all about you." James smirked, turning to his companions. She thought she could climb out of the help quarters and into Beacon Hill with a convenient pregnancy. The maitre d' appeared at Maya's elbow. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," James replied. "Just surprised to see familiar faces in unexpected places." The remainder of the shift passed in a haze of humiliation. When Maya collected her tips, she found the table had left exactly 27 cents and a business card for an abortion clinic. That night, Maya collapsed on the floor of her rented room, too exhausted even to make it to the bed. The heating had failed again, leaving the space cold enough to see her breath. Tomorrow she would need to face the diner, the clothing store, the office building, all while growing 2 lives inside her increasingly exhausted body. As tears tracked silently down her face, Maya felt the first real movements of the babies, tiny flutters that reminded her of butterfly wings. Placing both hands on her swelling abdomen, she made a promise that would sustain her through the darkest nights ahead. "We will survive this," she whispered fiercely, "and we will build something so magnificent that one day the man who thought we weren't good enough will look up and wonder how he could have been so blind." With shaking hands, Maya reached for her ancient laptop. Between shifts, she had been teaching herself advanced programming languages, knowledge that might someday translate into a better life. Opening a new document, she began typing despite her exhaustion. If she could complete just one more module tonight, that was one step closer to freedom. In the public library the next day, Maya found a quiet corner where she could study between jobs. Her eyes caught a headline on an abandoned tablet. "Morrison Enterprises prepares for record-breaking IPO." Blake's confident smile filled the screen, his arm around Rebecca at some gala. The caption noted their recent donation to a children's charity. Maya's hands trembled as she counted the coins in her pocket, just enough for vitamins or dinner, not both. While counting coins to buy prenatal vitamins, Maya couldn't imagine that one day her name would be engraved in the main hall of MIT as the donor who revolutionized the sustainable energy department. While counting coins to buy prenatal vitamins, Maya couldn't imagine that one day her name would be engraved in the main hall of MIT as the donor who revolutionized the sustainable energy department. The contractions began suddenly at 2 in the morning, 12 weeks before her due date. Maya woke gasping, clutching her swollen belly in the darkness of her tiny apartment. Too early. Much too early. Her trembling fingers dialed the only number she could think of. "Patricia? I think I'm in labor," she whispered into the phone, trying to control the panic in her voice. 30 minutes later, Maya lay in the back of Patricia Chen's sedan, breathing through contractions that came with terrifying regularity. The computer science professor had become an unexpected ally over the past months, mentoring Maya during her long hours at the public library. "We're almost there," Patricia said, her usual academic composure strained as she navigated Boston's empty streets. "Just hold on." The emergency room lights were harsh and unforgiving. Maya gripped the sides of the gurney as nurses rushed her through double doors, medical terms flying over her head. Premature labor, fetal distress, emergency C-section. "Is there anyone we should call?" a nurse asked, preparing an IV. Maya shook her head, tears sliding silently down her face. Patricia squeezed her hand before being directed to the waiting area. "I'll be right outside," Patricia promised. Hours later, Maya woke in recovery, the anesthesia fog slowly lifting. A doctor in surgical scrubs stood beside her bed, expression grave but not devastating. "Your sons are alive, Miss Johnson. Small but fighters. Sons, plural, real. They're in the NICU. 4 pounds each, remarkable for twins at 28 weeks. You can see them when you're stable." Maya closed her eyes, relief and terror washing over her in equal measure. 2 tiny lives depended entirely on her now, and she had nothing to offer them but determination. 3 days later, Maya was discharged, but her sons remained in plastic incubators, connected to monitors and feeding tubes. She established a punishing routine, expressing milk every 3 hours to be delivered to the hospital, working shortened shifts at the diner and cleaning service, spending every remaining minute beside the incubators, reading programming textbooks aloud to her sons as if they could understand algorithms and data structures. "Your voice soothes them," observed a night nurse, watching the monitors as Maya explained binary trees to her sleeping infants. "Have you chosen names?" Maya looked at her sons, so small yet already distinct, the slightly larger one with a determined furrow to his brow even in sleep. The smaller one whose tiny hand reached out reflexively whenever his brother made a sound. Elijah and Ethan, she decided. Names that meant strength and endurance. They would need both. 6 weeks later, Maya brought her sons home to the apartment she could barely afford. The space felt even smaller with 2 second-hand cribs wedged against the wall. She'd arranged milk crates as makeshift shelving, and the kitchenette counter served as a changing table. Everything was clean but worn, salvaged, or donated. "Welcome home," she whispered, placing each swaddled bundle in his crib. The enormity of her responsibility settled over her like a physical weight. 2 human beings, entirely dependent on her. No safety net, no family support, no partner to share the endless nights. Maya established systems with military precision, feeding schedules on one wall, study schedule on another. When the babies slept, she studied. When one cried, she'd balance him in one arm while continuing to read her textbooks. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours. Rosa, the elderly cook at the diner, became an unexpected ally, allowing Maya to bring the twins to work. They slept in a makeshift nursery fashioned from produce crates in the kitchen's back corner during her shifts. "My mother raised 6 children while working 2 jobs, Rosa explained simply. "Women help women." By the time the twins were 4 months old, Maya noticed something unusual. While most babies their age were just beginning to focus on objects, Elijah and Ethan tracked movement with startling precision. They responded to their names, turned toward specific sounds, and seemed unnaturally alert. "Advanced, even accounting for adjusted age," confirmed the pediatrician at their checkup. "Neurologically, they're developing ahead of schedule." Maya wasn't surprised. Despite everything, despite their premature birth and humble circumstances, her sons were thriving. They grew stronger each day, their personalities emerging. Elijah decisive and bold, Ethan thoughtful and observant. Patricia continued to mentor Maya, bringing advanced textbooks and occasionally watching the twins so Maya could attend workshops at the community college. The professor recognized something exceptional in her young protege. a natural intuition for complex systems that couldn't be taught. "You should apply for this," Patricia said one evening, sliding a brochure across Maya's kitchen table. "Special scholarship for non-traditional students with demonstrated aptitude. Full tuition." Maya stared at the glossy paper, hope and doubt warring within her. "They wouldn't accept someone like me." "They would if they saw what I see," Patricia insisted. "Genius doesn't wear a uniform, Maya." 2 weeks later, Maya submitted her application, attaching the algorithm optimization she'd developed between feedings and diaper changes. The twins, now able to sit supported, watched from their bouncy chairs as she sealed the envelope, tiny hands batting at colorful hanging toys. Summer faded into autumn. The twins grew stronger, sitting independently, babbling to each other in what seemed like their own private language. Maya continued her punishing schedule, reduced now to 2 jobs since Rosa had arranged full-time hours at the diner. Between shifts, she studied and cared for her increasingly active sons. On a crisp October morning, Maya took a different route to work, one that passed by the upscale Mount Auburn Cemetery. A black town car parked at the entrance caught her attention, its distinctive license plate unmistakable. Morrison. Curiosity overrode caution. Maya adjusted the twins' stroller and followed the path, keeping a discreet distance behind the well-dressed couple moving between granite monuments. Blake and Eleanor Morrison stopped before a small headstone set apart from the larger family plots. Eleanor placed a small bouquet of white roses at its base. Even from her position behind a maple tree, Maya could see Blake's shoulders heave once before straightening. When they departed, Maya approached the grave cautiously, half expecting to find the name of some long-deceased Morrison ancestor. Instead, the simple inscription froze her blood. "Baby Morrison gone too soon." April 15th, 2019. The date matched the twins' birth exactly. Maya stared at the empty grave, understanding dawning with sickening clarity. This was the Morrison solution, a fabricated tragedy, a fiction created to explain away an inconvenient pregnancy without social scandal. They had built a narrative where their grandchildren had died rather than acknowledge their existence. Maya knelt before the headstone, her fingers tracing the carved date that represented her son's arrival into the world. Behind her, Elijah and Ethan babbled happily in their stroller, oblivious to the stone that proclaimed their non-existence. "They buried you without ever knowing you," she whispered. "They mourned an idea rather than celebrate the miracle you are." That evening, Maya watched her sons sleep, their chests rising and falling in perfect synchrony. Elijah's small fist clutched his brother's pajama sleeve, even in sleep maintaining their connection. They were real, solid, extraordinary, and the Morrisons had chosen an empty grave over them. Maya's scholarship notification arrived 3 days later. Full tuition and a small stipend that would allow her to reduce her work hours. The accompanying letter mentioned her exceptional promise in computational architecture. As the twins approached their first birthday, growing more remarkable by the day, Maya established a new apartment routine. Their crib sides became whiteboards where she drew simple patterns and shapes. She narrated everything in detailed language, not baby talk but precise terminology. Bath time included lessons on buoyancy. Meals became introductions to nutritional chemistry. By 15 months, both boys could identify all letters and numbers. By 18 months, they were speaking in complete sentences and showing an uncanny ability to recognize patterns. Maya documented their development meticulously, creating exercises that challenged their rapidly developing minds. Patricia watched this acceleration with academic fascination. "I've never seen anything like it. They're not just advanced, they're exceptional." "They were born that way," Maya replied simply. "I'm just making sure the world doesn't dim their light." 2 years after the twins' birth, Maya stood before the mirror in her improved but still modest apartment. The young woman who had once cleaned the Morrison mansion was gone, replaced by someone with clear purpose in her eyes. Her scholarship had expanded to include research opportunities. Her algorithms were generating interest beyond the university. The twins, now speaking at the level of children twice their age, built complex structures with blocks on the floor nearby, discussing architectural integrity with vocabulary no 2-year-old should possess. Maya touched the acceptance letter on her desk. Her transfer to the full engineering program had been approved with advanced standing. The path forward was becoming clearer each day. That night, she took the twins to Mount Auburn Cemetery once more. Standing before the empty grave that bore their birth date, Maya felt not anger, but a strange sense of gratitude. The Morrisons' rejection had forced her to build something entirely her own, something pure and uncompromised. "Your grandmother left roses last week," she told the twins, who stared curiously at the small stone. "She thinks you're here, but look how wrong she is." Elijah tilted his head. "Why does the rock have our birthday?" Maya knelt to their level. "Because some people find it easier to pretend than to face the truth. But we know better, don't we?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "We're not under rocks. We're here." "Yes, you are," Maya whispered, pulling them close. "And one day, everyone will know exactly who you are." While observing the empty grave that supposedly represented her sons, Maya didn't know that in 10 years that same cemetery would be the stage for the most satisfying moment of her life, when the truth would finally come to light. While observing the empty grave that supposedly represented her sons, Maya didn't know that in 10 years that same cemetery would be the stage for the most satisfying moment of her life, when the truth would finally come to light. 4 years had passed since that cold April morning when Elijah and Ethan had entered the world, tiny but determined. The cramped apartment Maya had once struggled to afford had been replaced by a modest 2-bedroom unit closer to campus. Sunlight streamed through actual curtains, not the threadbare sheets that had once covered the windows, illuminating a space that, while simple, radiated purpose and stability. Maya adjusted her graduation cap in the bathroom mirror, the tassel swinging with each movement. Her reflection showed someone transformed, not just by the passing years but by relentless determination. Dark circles still shadowed her eyes, but they now spoke of purpose rather than desperation. "Mommy looks pretty," Ethan announced from the doorway, his small frame dwarfed by the suit Maya had carefully saved for months to purchase. Elijah appeared beside his brother, their matching outfits emphasizing their identical features. "Are we going to see you get your paper now?" Maya smiled, kneeling to straighten their miniature ties. "My diploma, and yes, you'll be sitting with Dr. Chen during the ceremony." "Will there be algorithms?" Elijah asked hopefully. "Probably just speeches," Maya replied, marveling at how her 4-year-olds discussed algorithms with the same enthusiasm other children reserved for cartoons. The university auditorium buzzed with excited graduates and proud families. Maya scanned the crowd, spotting Patricia Chen seated with the twins in the family section. The computer science professor had become far more than a mentor. She was the closest thing to family Maya had found since leaving home at 17. "Johnson Maya, Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering, summa cum laude," the dean announced. Walking across the stage, Maya felt the weight of the past 4 years, the sleepless nights, the 3-job juggling act that had eventually condensed to a research assistantship, the endless hours of study while the twins napped. Her fingers closed around the diploma, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine Blake Morrison's face if he could see her now. Not cleaning floors, creating algorithms that his engineers couldn't match. After the ceremony, Patricia embraced her. "I've never been prouder of any student," she said, blinking rapidly behind her glasses. "And I have news. The master's program in sustainable energy engineering wants you. Full scholarship plus stipend." Maya stared at her mentor, processing the implications. "That's a doctoral track program." Patricia nodded. "They've seen your work on computational efficiency. The department chair specifically requested you." The twins tugged at Maya's graduation gown, their remarkable vocabulary momentarily abandoned in their excitement. This moment, the validation, the opportunity, the open door to a future she had once thought permanently closed, brought tears to her eyes. That evening they celebrated with takeout Chinese food in their apartment, the twins meticulously using chopsticks with a dexterity that astonished the delivery person. Maya watched them, these extraordinary boys who somehow managed to exceed every developmental milestone by substantial margins. Fortune Cookie says, "New journey begins with single step." Elijah read without hesitation. Ethan broke his open. Mine says, "Success comes to those who work for it." Maya smiled. Very appropriate for today. The master's program proved even more demanding than her undergraduate studies. While her peers struggled with the advanced concepts, Maya found herself thriving in the complex world of energy conversion efficiency and computational optimization. The university laboratory became her second home, the twins often doing their advanced reading on a couch she'd placed in the corner of her research space. "They're reading at a third-grade level," remarked Professor Whitman, the department chair, watching the 4-year-olds quietly discussing a science book meant for children 3 times their age. "Have you had them tested?" Maya nodded. "Multiple times. They're classified as profoundly gifted. Takes after their mother," Whitman replied, gesturing to the complex equations Maya had filled 3 whiteboards with. "Your approach to the solar energy storage problem is unlike anything I've seen." 6 months into her graduate program, Maya found herself working late in the lab, the twins asleep on their customary couch. The problem had consumed her for weeks: how to optimize the storage capacity of solar batteries without increasing their physical footprint or manufacturing cost. She stared at the equations, something nagging at the edge of her consciousness. The solution seemed just beyond reach, hovering like a word on the tip of her tongue. "Mommy, why not make it go sideways?" Elijah's sleepy voice startled her. Maya turned to find both twins sitting up, rubbing their eyes but staring at her equations with surprising focus. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Ethan pointed to the board. "The numbers are trying to go up, but they keep hitting the ceiling. Make them go sideways instead." Maya blinked, looking back at her work. Lateral energy distribution rather than vertical accumulation. It was such a simple conceptual shift, yet it might solve the bottleneck she'd been fighting. Working feverishly, she restructured her approach, the twins occasionally offering observations that, despite their childish phrasing, contained genuine insight. By dawn, she'd developed an algorithm that theoretically increased storage efficiency by 37%. 2 weeks later, her simulation confirmed the breakthrough. The algorithm worked even better than projected, reducing energy loss during storage conversion by nearly 40%. "This is publishable," Patricia insisted, reviewing the data. "Not just publishable, patentable." Within a month, Maya found herself presenting her findings to a panel that included representatives from major energy corporations. She stood confidently before experts twice her age, explaining her innovation with clarity and precision. "We'd like to offer you $50,000 for exclusive rights to this algorithm," said a gray-haired executive from Solar Tech Industries after her presentation. "It's a generous amount for someone in your situation." The hesitation before situation carried volumes. A young single mother, still a student, clearly in need of money. The condescension in his tone transported Maya instantly back to Blake Morrison's library, to the checkbook casually produced to solve the problem of her existence. "My situation," Maya replied evenly, "is that of the inventor of an algorithm conservatively worth millions in industry applications. So no, 50,000 isn't remotely close to generous. It's exploitative." The executive's eyebrows shot up. "Perhaps you misunderstand the realities of bringing such technology to market. The development costs are minimal compared to the projected savings," Maya finished. "I've run those numbers too. Thank you for your interest, but I'll be pursuing other options." That evening, Patricia introduced Maya to Sarah Lynn, a former student who had become a prominent angel investor focusing on women-led technologies. "I've been following your work," Sarah said, studying Maya over dinner in a modest restaurant near campus. The twins sat nearby, engrossed in advanced puzzle books. "Your approach to energy storage could revolutionize the field." "That's the intention," Maya replied. Sarah smiled. "Most inventors with breakthrough technology either sell too cheaply or try to develop alone and fail. What's your plan?" "Neither," Maya said. "I'm starting my own company." 3 weeks later, Maya found herself explaining her algorithm to Sarah's investment group using everyday objects to illustrate complex principles. The twins occasionally chimed in with surprisingly coherent additions, causing raised eyebrows among the investors. "In 15 years of investments, I've never seen a solution so elegant for a problem so complex," Sarah said afterward. "And I've certainly never seen 4-year-olds who could articulate molecular energy transfer." The initial investment came through, $300,000 to develop a working prototype. Maya signed the paperwork at her kitchen table, the formal beginning of Johnson Renewables. Her first hire was Dr. Samantha Wright, a brilliant materials scientist who abandoned a tenured position at MIT to join what was essentially a startup operating from a rented garage. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," Samantha admitted, helping Maya set up their makeshift lab. Leaving academic security for a company run by a graduate student with no business experience. Maya looked up from the equipment she was calibrating. "What made you take the risk?" Samantha gestured to the algorithm displayed on Maya's laptop. "In 20 years of research, I've never seen anything with this potential. And frankly, watching you present it to that room full of condescending executives who couldn't grasp what they were being shown, I knew I wanted to be on your side of history." The garage transformed into a functional laboratory. The twins, now approaching 5, proved surprisingly helpful with basic assembly tasks, their small fingers perfect for connecting delicate components. "This goes here because the electrons need a path," Elijah explained seriously to Samantha, who nodded with genuine respect rather than the patronizing smile adults typically offered children. On the night Maya received the first investment check, they celebrated with pizza on the garage floor. Elijah and Ethan perched on overturned crates while Maya and Samantha sat cross-legged on the concrete, toasting with cans of soda. "To Johnson Renewables," Samantha said, raising her can, "future energy giant." "To making the impossible possible," Maya added, watching her sons happily devouring their pizza slices, unaware they were part of something that might one day change the world. She thought briefly of Blake Morrison, of his cruel dismissal years ago. "Women like you are for cleaning, not for building legacies," he had said. Yet here she was, the foundation of her legacy taking shape in this humble garage. While they toasted with soda in an improvised garage, no one could predict that in just 6 years that small startup would be valued in billions, and the garage would be recreated as an exhibit in the global headquarters lobby of Johnson Renewables. While they toasted with soda in an improvised garage, no one could predict that in just 6 years that small startup would be valued in billions, and the garage would be recreated as an exhibit in the global headquarters lobby of Johnson Renewables. 3 years later, Maya stood at the head of a conference table in Johnson Renewables' modest office space, presenting quarterly projections to her team of 15 employees. Sunlight streamed through actual windows now, a significant upgrade from the garage where everything had begun. Her tailored blazer, while not designer, represented another milestone, clothes purchased for their appearance rather than merely their function. "Our prototype has exceeded all benchmarks," Maya concluded, gesturing to the graphs displayed on the wall screen. "Storage capacity is 42% higher than our closest competitor, with manufacturing costs only marginally increased." Samantha Wright, now Chief Technology Officer, nodded approvingly. "The university testing confirms everything. We're ready for scale." Later that afternoon, Maya watched as technicians carefully packed their third-generation battery prototype for shipping to Massachusetts General Hospital, their first major client. The $1.2 million contract represented more money than Maya had once imagined possible, yet now served merely as proof of concept for much larger ambitions. "Ms. Johnson?" Her assistant appeared at the doorway. "The school principal is online too. Something about the twins." Maya's heart rate spiked momentarily before she reminded herself that 7-year-olds with IQs above 160 occasionally created situations that confused traditional educational structures. "This is Maya Johnson," she answered, pressing the speaker button. "Ms. Johnson, this is Principal Everett. I'm calling about Elijah and Ethan." "Are they all right?" "They're fine, but we need to discuss their placement. Their teacher administered the standard achievement tests today and, well, they scored at high school level in mathematics and reading comprehension." Maya suppressed a smile. "That's consistent with their previous assessments. Ms. Johnson, with all due respect, this goes beyond gifted. We simply don't have the resources to challenge them appropriately. I'm recommending advancement by 3 grade levels, minimum." After arranging a meeting for the following day, Maya returned to her office to find both boys sitting quietly on her couch, solving complex equations on their tablets. The school had sent them to her office after they'd completed the day's lessons before morning snack time. "Mom, can we optimize the new battery algorithm?" Elijah asked without looking up. "We found a potential inefficiency in the distribution matrix." Maya studied her sons. These extraordinary boys who somehow managed to exceed every developmental expectation. "Show me." Ethan turned his tablet toward her, displaying a modified version of her original algorithm with an elegant tweak to the distribution pathway. Maya's eyebrows rose involuntarily. The modification was genuinely insightful. "We'll implement it in the next test cycle," she promised. That evening, in their modest but comfortable San Francisco apartment, Maya helped the boys with an advanced calculus problem while simultaneously preparing dinner. The move west had been strategic. Silicon Valley offered access to both technological resources and potential investors that Boston couldn't match. "Mom, why does the square root function simplify this?" Elijah asked, pointing to his work. Maya explained the mathematical principle while stirring pasta sauce. This constant balance, nurturing both their intellectual development and ensuring they experienced childhood joys, had become her most complex algorithm. The following week, Maya stood before a room of venture capitalists, her presentation on Johnson Renewables' patented technology displayed behind her. 3 representatives from different firms leaned forward, their initial skepticism giving way to genuine interest. "Your prototype results are impressive," admitted a silver-haired man who had initially checked his watch repeatedly during her introduction. "But scaling manufacturing presents significant challenges." Maya nodded. "We've anticipated those. Our production model incorporates automated assembly specifically designed for our components, reducing labor costs by 36%, compared to industry standards." By the meeting's end, Maya had fielded questions that would have intimidated seasoned executives with decades more experience. The term sheet arrived 3 days later. A $7 million Series A investment valuing Johnson Renewables at $45 million. As Maya signed the documents formally accepting the investment, her phone buzzed with a notification. A technology news site had published an article titled "Johnson Renewables, the silent revolutionary in solar energy storage." The accompanying photo showed Maya standing confidently beside their latest prototype, no trace visible of the exhausted young woman who had once juggled 3 minimum-wage jobs. She scrolled through the article, appreciating the technical accuracy until a paragraph near the end caught her attention. Industry insiders wonder why established players like Morrison Technologies haven't acquired this promising startup. Sources suggest Morrison has made overtures, apparently unaware of the founder's identity. Maya's breath caught. She hadn't heard the Morrison name spoken aloud in years, though she occasionally saw Blake's face in business publications. Her assistant entered with a stack of correspondence, interrupting her thoughts. "This came by courier," she said, placing an embossed envelope on top. "From Morrison Technologies." The letter inside was brief and corporate. Morrison Technologies expressed interest in acquiring Johnson Renewables' intellectual property and key assets, offering to begin discussions at an appropriate valuation. Maya composed her response carefully. "Johnson Renewables appreciates your interest, but believes we can deliver greater value maintaining our independence. We wish Morrison Technologies success in its own renewable energy endeavors." The reply was professional, betraying no hint that the woman who had once cleaned Blake Morrison's floors was now declining his business overture. 3,000 miles away, Blake Morrison slammed his fist on a conference table as his executive team delivered another quarter of disappointing results. "How did we miss this Johnson Renewables technology?" he demanded, glaring at his head of R&D. "They're a startup with a fraction of our resources, yet they've leapfrogged our entire research division." "Their approach is fundamentally different," the R&D director explained. "We focused on incremental improvements to existing systems while they reimagined the entire architecture." "And they rejected our acquisition offer?" Blake's face flushed with anger. "Who does this Johnson person think they are?" An aide slid a magazine across the table. The latest issue of MIT Technology Review with Maya's photo on page 17. "That's Maya Johnson, former graduate student who developed the algorithm while still completing her master's degree." Blake glanced at the photo, a flicker of something, recognition, confusion, crossing his features before he pushed the magazine away. "Find a way to get this technology. I don't care how." Back in San Francisco, Maya interviewed candidates for a senior executive position. Johnson Renewables had grown to 40 employees and recently leased an entire floor in a downtown office building. "Your background is impressive," Maya told Richard Ferris, who had left a VP position at a Fortune 500 company to interview with her. "But I'm curious why you'd leave such security for a company still establishing itself." Ferris leaned forward. "Because everyone in energy storage is talking about your algorithm. What you've developed could fundamentally change how we approach renewable energy implementation. I want to be part of that revolution, not watching from the sidelines." Later that month, Maya sat for her first major media interview, a podcast focused on emerging technologies. The host skillfully probed her background, which Maya navigated carefully, emphasizing her education and technical innovations while revealing little about her personal journey. "You're unusually private for a founder in this space," the host observed. "Most entrepreneurs have origin stories they leverage for publicity." Maya smiled. "I prefer our technology to speak for itself." The twins, now 7 and already attending advanced classes with children 4 years older, continued to develop at an extraordinary pace. Their natural gifts, nurtured by Maya's careful guidance, blossomed into genuine brilliance. Stanford University had invited them to participate in a weekend program for exceptionally gifted children, an honor typically reserved for students at least twice their age. "Mom, can we build a quantum computer?" Ethan asked one evening as Maya reviewed contract terms with Samantha over dinner. "Maybe next year," Maya replied without missing a beat. "Focus on mastering linear algebra first." Samantha chuckled. "Most parents worry about video game time. You're negotiating quantum computing timelines." As Johnson Renewables approached its 3rd anniversary, Maya signed documents for another round of funding, $25 million at a company valuation of $150 million. The garage where they had started was now being professionally photographed for a company retrospective, the humble beginning of what was becoming a significant enterprise. That evening, Maya scrolled through industry news on her tablet, pausing at a headline, "Morrison Technologies struggles to compete in renewable space." The accompanying photo showed Blake at a shareholders' meeting, his expression tense as he addressed concerns about the company's direction. For a brief moment, Maya allowed herself to remember his words from years ago. "Women like you are for cleaning, not for building legacies. She glanced around her office, at the patents framed on the wall, the prototype that was revolutionizing energy storage, the files containing projections for a company now valued at nearly $150 million. Legacy, indeed. While signing the multi-million-dollar agreement, Maya didn't know that a copy of the magazine with her photo on the cover was sitting on Blake Morrison's desk, who had not yet connected the name of the renewable energy sensation with the maid he had abandoned pregnant years ago. While signing the multi-million-dollar agreement, Maya didn't know that a copy of the magazine with her photo on the cover was sitting on Blake Morrison's desk, who had not yet connected the name of the renewable energy sensation with the maid he had abandoned pregnant years ago. 2 years later, Maya gazed out from the 35th floor of the gleaming San Francisco high-rise that now housed Johnson Renewable's headquarters. The panoramic view of the bay stretched before her, sunlight glinting off the water in a way that still occasionally caught her breath. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window showed a woman transformed, tailored Armani suit, confidence in her posture, and a quiet power that had been hard-earned through years of relentless work. "The board meeting starts in 5 minutes, Ms. Johnson," her executive assistant announced from the doorway. Maya nodded, gathering the presentation materials for what promised to be a historic announcement. As she walked the corridor to the boardroom, employees nodded respectfully. Some had been with her since the garage days, others had left prestigious positions at tech giants to join what industry insiders now called the most innovative energy company of the decade. The boardroom fell silent as Maya took her position at the head of the table. 12 faces turned toward her. Investors, executives, and advisors who had helped transform her algorithm into an empire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya began, her voice steady and assured, "I'm pleased to announce that as of 9 o'clock this morning, Johnson Renewables has officially achieved unicorn status. Our latest valuation, $1.2 billion. A ripple of applause moved through the room. Samantha Wright, still her trusted CTO, raised a water glass in silent toast. The journey from garage startup to billion-dollar company had taken just under 6 years, a meteoric rise even by Silicon Valley standards. Later that afternoon, Maya slipped away from headquarters to attend Elijah and Ethan's presentation at Stanford University. The 9-year-old twins stood confidently before a panel of physics professors, explaining their theory on quantum entanglement as it related to energy transfer. Their small frames in tailored blazers presented a striking contrast to the adult academics who leaned forward, captivated by explanations coming from children who should have been playing with action figures rather than discussing particle physics. "Your sons are extraordinary," remarked Professor Hiram Chen after the presentation. "We'd like to include them in our advanced research program next semester. It's typically reserved for doctoral candidates, but exceptions must be made for exceptional minds." Maya watched her sons accepting congratulations from people 5 times their age. Elijah, always the more assertive twin, fielded questions with easy confidence. Ethan, the contemplative one, added thoughtful clarifications when needed. Both displayed a comfort with their exceptional intellects that Maya had worked hard to foster: brilliance without arrogance, confidence without entitlement. "Mom, can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Elijah asked as they left the physics building, momentarily just a 9-year-old despite having just impressed some of the world's leading scientists. "Absolutely," Maya smiled, taking each boy's hand in hers. These small moments of childhood normalcy were precious counterbalances to their accelerated academic lives. The following morning brought an unexpected invitation. The producers of Visionaries, a popular reality show profiling innovative CEOs, wanted Maya as their next subject. The email promised extensive coverage of Johnson Renewables' inspiring journey from startup to industry leader. Maya declined without hesitation. Her private life, particularly the circumstances of the twins' birth, remained carefully guarded. The narrative she presented to the world began with her graduate studies and algorithm development. Everything before existed in a locked vault that protected both her and her sons from unwanted scrutiny. Instead, Maya channeled her growing public profile into launching the Renaissance Project, a foundation supporting single mothers pursuing STEM careers. The organization provided scholarships, childcare, and mentorship, creating paths for women facing the same obstacles Maya had once navigated alone. "This foundation is personal for you," observed Sarah Lynn at the launch event. "All innovation is personal," Maya replied carefully. "It comes from identifying problems that need solving." 3,000 miles away, Blake Morrison slumped in his leather chair, staring at quarterly reports that showed Morrison Technologies losing market share for the third consecutive quarter. At 41, premature gray streaked his temples, and lines of worry had permanently etched themselves around his eyes. "The board is getting restless, Blake," his father's longtime assistant warned, placing more financial documents on his desk. "They're asking why Morrison Tech is falling behind in renewable energy when we used to lead the sector." Blake scowled, reaching for the industry analysis his team had prepared. Johnson Renewables featured prominently, their battery technology now powering everything from residential buildings to hospital emergency systems. He studied the company profile, a nagging sense of familiarity tugging at him whenever he saw Maya Johnson's name or photo. "There's something about her," he muttered, examining the formal portrait of Johnson Renewables' founder. The confident woman with the penetrating gaze seemed to be looking through him rather than at the camera. His door opened without a knock as Rebecca entered, her designer outfit impeccable despite the early hour. Their marriage, always more strategic than passionate, had cooled further as Morrison Tech's fortunes declined. "The charity gala is tonight," she reminded him coolly. "Try to look less defeated. People are starting to talk about your company's challenges." Blake nodded absently, still studying Maya's photo. "Have we ever met Johnson Renewables' CEO? Something about her seems familiar." Rebecca glanced dismissively at the report. "Unlikely. She's not exactly from our circle." She paused at the door. "Don't be late tonight. My father will be there, and he's concerned about our investment." After she left, Blake searched for more information about Maya Johnson. The official biography was impressive but oddly sparse on personal details. Graduate degree in engineering, breakthrough algorithm development, rapid company expansion. Nothing about her childhood, family background, or personal life beyond carefully staged photos with her twin sons at company events. Meanwhile, Maya negotiated the final terms of a $500 million government contract to implement Johnson Renewables battery systems in federal buildings nationwide. The conference room at the Department of Energy buzzed with excitement as officials reviewed the projected energy savings. "This represents the largest clean energy initiative in federal history," announced the Energy Secretary. "Johnson Renewables has fundamentally changed what's possible in sustainable power." As cameras flashed, Maya thought briefly of the small room in Dorchester where she'd once counted pennies for prenatal vitamins. The contrast between then and now sometimes seemed too vast to reconcile, as if that desperate young woman and this accomplished CEO existed in parallel universes rather than along the same life trajectory. The following week, Business Insider published the first comprehensive profile of Maya Johnson, titled "The Algorithm Queen: How One Woman's Equation Changed Energy Storage Forever." The writer had pressed for personal background, which Maya had skillfully redirected toward her technical innovations. Johnson remains remarkably private about her journey before graduate school, the article noted. This reluctance to leverage personal narrative stands in stark contrast to most Silicon Valley success stories, which often mythologize humble beginnings. The profile included photos of Maya with the twins at the opening of Johnson Renewables Research Campus, their remarkable academic achievements mentioned briefly as evidence of intellectual genetics at work. No father was referenced or questioned. Blake read the article during his morning coffee, that persistent sense of recognition growing stronger. Something about her eyes, perhaps, or the set of her jaw when photographed in profile. He switched on CNBC, where Maya was being interviewed about the government contract. "There's something familiar about her," he commented to his housekeeper, who glanced briefly at the screen before continuing to arrange fresh flowers. "Probably just on the news a lot, sir," she replied diplomatically. "Success gets attention." Eleanor Morrison saw the same interview from her breakfast room in the Beacon Hill mansion. At 70, she retained the regal bearing and sharp mind that had helped build the Morrison legacy. She frowned slightly at Maya's image, a vague discomfort settling over her that she couldn't quite place. As spring turned to summer, Johnson Renewables' expansion continued unabated. Maya reviewed plans for their new research facility, approving the architect's design that incorporated sustainable materials and their own energy systems throughout. The twins, now approaching their 10th birthday, had begun work on a secret project of their own, using one of the company labs after hours with Maya's permission. Their natural affinity for complex systems had evolved into genuine innovation, their weekend projects occasionally yielding patentable ideas. At the Johnson Renewables annual gala, Maya stood at the center of a crowd of admirers in a Valentino gown that emphasized her elegant figure. Watching her command the room with quiet authority, few would have imagined this poised executive had once worn second-hand uniforms while serving coffee to Boston's elite. The event raised $2 million for the Renaissance Project, with Silicon Valley's most powerful figures competing to demonstrate their support. The twins, impeccable in custom tuxedos, charmed potential donors with their articulate descriptions of the foundation's impact. As summer drew to a close, an invitation arrived that Maya had both anticipated and dreaded. TechBridge Boston, the most prestigious technology conference on the East Coast, wanted her as their keynote speaker. The event would mark her first return to Boston in 10 years, a homecoming laden with emotional landmines. "Will you accept?" Samantha asked, recognizing the significance of the invitation. Maya stared at the formal letter. "Professionally, we can't afford to decline. Our East Coast expansion depends on this visibility." What remained unspoken was the real question. Was she ready to return to the city where Blake Morrison had broken her, where Eleanor Morrison had handed her an envelope of cash and shown her the door, where she had once cleaned toilets while pregnant with twins now recognized as prodigies? "Mom, can we visit MIT while we're in Boston?" Elijah asked when she mentioned the trip, his eyes bright with excitement. "We've always wanted to see their quantum computing lab." "Of course," Maya replied, stroking his hair. "We have meetings there on Thursday. You can tour the physics department." "You lived in Boston, right?" Ethan asked, always the more perceptive twin. "You never showed us where." Maya smiled, hiding the tension the innocent question provoked. "Yes, but I don't have good memories there. This trip is about the future, not the past." Holding the conference invitation, Maya didn't know that in less than 24 hours she would be face-to-face with the man who had discarded her as insufficient, now begging for 5 minutes of her attention in a world where she had become a giant, and he was merely a shadow of the success he once imagined for himself. Holding the conference invitation, Maya didn't know that in less than 24 hours she would be face-to-face with the man who had discarded her as insufficient, now begging for 5 minutes of her attention in a world where she had become a giant, and he was merely a shadow of the success he once imagined for himself. Maya placed the TechBridge Boston invitation on her desk, her fingers lingering on the embossed lettering. The thought of returning to Boston after 10 years sent a current of anxiety through her body that she hadn't experienced since those early days of desperation. She glanced at the framed photo of Elijah and Ethan, now vibrant 10-year-olds whose brilliance continually astonished even her. They were the reason she couldn't avoid Boston forever. Their heritage, however painful, existed in that city's streets and institutions. "Ms. Johnson, your prep team is ready for the TechBridge briefing," her executive assistant announced from the doorway. Maya nodded, straightening her posture and tucking away the vulnerability that had momentarily surfaced. CEO mode activated. the armor she'd constructed over years of proving herself in rooms full of men who underestimated her. "I've prepared a deck highlighting our East Coast expansion strategy," Samantha explained as Maya entered the conference room. "The keynote speech is an ideal platform to announce the new Boston Research Center." The irony wasn't lost on Maya, establishing a multi-million-dollar facility in the same city where she'd once cleaned office buildings after midnight while pregnant. Life had a peculiar symmetry sometimes. That evening in their penthouse apartment, Maya found the twins huddled over their tablets, engrossed in quantum physics simulations. The contrast between their current life and their beginning remained stark. These boys, who now attended elite programs and slept in custom-designed beds, had once shared a makeshift crib fashioned from reinforced moving boxes. "Mom, I made a list of questions for the MIT professors," Elijah announced, showing her his meticulously organized document. "And I researched the history of their physics department," Ethan added. "Did you know they have 11 Nobel laureates?" Maya smiled, sitting between them on the sofa. "I did. Their contribution to theoretical physics is unparalleled." "You never talk about when you lived in Boston," Ethan observed, his perceptive gaze searching her face. "Was it when we were babies?" The question hung in the air, innocent, yet piercing. Maya had shared carefully curated versions of their early years. Enough truth to be honest, enough omission to protect them from pain that wasn't theirs to bear. "Yes, that's where you were born," she answered, measuring her words. "Boston is complicated for me. Some wonderful things happened there, like having you two. Other experiences were more challenging." "Was our father from Boston?" Elijah asked directly, the question she'd known would eventually come. Maya took a deep breath. This moment had been inevitable. These brilliant boys who could solve differential equations would certainly piece together the puzzle of their own origins eventually. "Yes, he was," she acknowledged. "He's probably still there. Why isn't he part of our lives?" Ethan's voice held curiosity rather than accusation. Maya chose her words carefully. "When I told him I was pregnant, he made it clear he didn't want to be a father. He made choices that hurt us very deeply." "Because he didn't think you were good enough," Elijah stated, surprising Maya with his perception. "We overheard you talking to Dr. Wright once." Maya's chest tightened. "The truth is, he came from a wealthy family with certain expectations. When faced with the choice between those expectations and us, he chose his family's approval." "His loss," Ethan said simply. "We're pretty awesome." Maya pulled them both into a hug, blinking back unexpected tears. "The most awesome, and we've done incredibly well, just the three of us." That night, Maya found herself unable to sleep, memories of Boston surfacing like bubbles in still water. She opened her laptop and pulled up an article about Morrison Technology's recent struggles. Blake's company had reported its third consecutive quarter of losses, with industry analysts questioning his leadership capabilities. The photo accompanying the article showed him at a press conference, still handsome in a conventional way, but with new lines of strain around his eyes, a tightness to his mouth that hadn't been there a decade ago. Maya closed the article, unsettled by how little she felt when looking at his face. No rage, no satisfaction, just a distant recognition of someone who had once wielded enormous power over her life and now seemed strangely irrelevant. 3,000 miles away, Blake Morrison sat alone in his Boston office, reviewing his presentation for the TechBridge panel. Being relegated to a secondary speaking slot represented another humiliation in a year full of them. Morrison Technologies had once been positioned to dominate the renewable energy sector. Now they struggled to maintain relevance as innovators like Johnson Renewables redefined the industry. "The panel has been moved to Friday afternoon," his assistant informed him via email. The committee extended Maya Johnson's keynote to 90 minutes due to overwhelming interest. Blake scowled, searching for information about the woman who had somehow become the darling of the industry he'd once dominated. The official Johnson Renewables website offered little beyond professional accomplishments. Social media yielded occasional photos at industry events, always accompanied by her twin sons, remarkably intelligent boys according to the captions, already attending advanced programs at Stanford. Something about those boys nagged at him, a familiarity he couldn't place. Their features triggered a recognition that remained frustratingly out of reach. The week before the conference, Maya's preparation intensified. Her speech had been meticulously crafted to showcase Johnson Renewable's vision while revealing nothing of her personal journey. She underwent media training refreshers, reviewed potential questions, and selected her wardrobe with precision, a deep burgundy Armani suit that projected authority and confidence. The Boston Globe wants a pre-conference exclusive interview, her PR director mentioned during their final briefing. They're particularly interested in your personal connection to the city. Decline politely, Maya instructed. Offer them priority access to our research center announcement instead. The night before their departure, Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her bedroom, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. She'd come so far from the desperate young woman who'd once stared at Boston's skyline from a shelter window, wondering how she would survive the next day. "Mom, are you okay?" Ethan's voice came from her doorway. Maya turned, finding both twins watching her with concern. Sometimes she forgot how attuned they were to emotional nuances most children missed. "Just thinking about tomorrow's trip," she answered honestly. "Are you nervous about going back to Boston?" Elijah asked. "A little," Maya admitted. "I left under difficult circumstances." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications that had fascinated researchers since infancy. "We've been talking," Ethan said carefully. "If our father is still in Boston, and if we happen to see him, would that be okay?" The question caught Maya off guard. "That's complicated. He doesn't know you exist. Not really." "How can he not know?" Elijah's brow furrowed. "Didn't you tell him you were having us?" "I did," Maya confirmed. "But sometimes people hear only what they want to hear. He chose to believe I would not continue with the pregnancy." Understanding dawned in their young faces, their exceptional intelligence processing implications beyond their years. "That's why you work so hard for the Renaissance Foundation," Ethan realized. "Because you were a single mom with no support." Maya nodded, once again struck by their perceptiveness. "Everyone deserves a chance to build the life they want, regardless of their circumstances." The following morning, Maya's team assembled at the private airport terminal where the Johnson Renewables corporate jet awaited. The twins vibrated with excitement, their first visit to Boston representing an academic pilgrimage to MIT rather than a return to painful origins. As they boarded the plane, Maya caught her reflection in a window. Designer suit, confident posture, clear eyes. Nothing remained of the frightened girl who had fled Boston with plastic shopping bags and dwindling hope. That girl had been transformed through determination and intellect into someone unrecognizable, perhaps even to Blake Morrison. During the flight, Maya reviewed her keynote one final time while the twins debated string theory with Samantha. The normalcy of the scene belied the emotional complexity awaiting in Boston, a city where Maya had once represented the invisible underclass, returning now as one of its most anticipated visitors. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes, the pilot announced. "Current temperature in Boston is 68 degrees under partly cloudy skies." Maya closed her laptop and gazed out the window as the familiar coastline appeared below. Somewhere in that skyline was the Morrison mansion where she'd once worked, the office building she'd once cleaned, the cemetery with its empty grave. And somewhere, Blake Morrison was preparing for a conference where he would be a secondary figure while she commanded the spotlight. "Ready?" Samantha asked quietly, recognizing the weight of the moment. Maya nodded, her expression resolute. "More than ready." As the plane descended toward Boston, Maya couldn't imagine that in less than 24 hours, she would stand face to face with the man who had broken her world, watching recognition dawn in his eyes as he realized the woman commanding the industry's respect was the same one he had deemed unworthy of basic human dignity a decade ago. As the plane descended toward Boston, Maya couldn't imagine that in less than 24 hours she would stand face to face with the man who had broken her world, watching recognition dawn in his eyes as he realized the woman commanding the industry's respect was the same one he had deemed unworthy of basic human dignity a decade ago. The Heinz Convention Center gleamed under the morning sun, its glass facade adorned with massive TechBridge conference banners. A line of executives, investors, and media representatives snaked around the building, each person clutching credentials and conference programs. Maya's town car pulled up to the VIP entrance where event staff immediately sprang to attention. "Ms. Johnson, welcome to TechBridge Boston." The coordinator's smile was deferential. "Your team has already arrived and is setting up in the speaker's preparation room." Maya stepped out, her burgundy Armani suit a stark contrast against her smooth, dark skin. The twins emerged behind her, matching navy blazers over crisp white shirts, making them look like miniature executives. Behind them came Maya's executive team, Samantha, 2 senior VPs, and her chief of security, a former Secret Service agent whose services had become necessary as Johnson Renewable's profile rose. "The governor is running 15 minutes late for your private meeting," the coordinator continued, guiding them through a private entrance. "He sends his apologies." Maya nodded, checking her watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that had replaced the drugstore digital she'd worn during her early struggles. "That's fine. It gives me time to review the presentation space." Inside, the convention center hummed with pre-event energy. Staff rushed between stations, technicians tested equipment, and early arrivals networked over coffee. Maya guided her sons through the exclusive pathways reserved for featured speakers, occasionally stopping to greet industry colleagues who had traveled from around the world. "Maya Johnson, the woman of the hour." The conference director approached, hand extended. "Your keynote is the most anticipated session in TechBridge history. We've had to move it to the grand ballroom to accommodate demand." In the VIP speakers lounge, Blake Morrison sat alone, obsessively reviewing his panel notes. At 42, his once confident posture had acquired a defensive hunch. The premature gray at his temples and deepening lines around his eyes spoke of recent struggles. His company's declining stock price and failed innovations weighed on him visibly, his designer suit no longer fitting quite as perfectly as it once had. "Mr. Morrison?" An event coordinator approached hesitantly. "There's been a scheduling adjustment. Your panel has been moved to tomorrow afternoon to accommodate Ms. Johnson's extended keynote." Blake's jaw tightened. "That's the third change to my schedule. I apologize for the inconvenience. The demand for Ms. Johnson's presentation has exceeded all expectations." The coordinator's apologetic smile didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps you'd like to attend. We've reserved seats for featured speakers." Before Blake could respond, the lounge door opened. Maya entered, surrounded by attentive executives who seemed to hang on her every word. Blake looked up instinctively at the new arrival, and time seemed to crystallize around him. Recognition didn't come immediately. His brain registered an impressive woman in expensive clothing, radiating authority and confidence. Then something clicked. A gesture, perhaps, or the particular angle of her chin when she turned to address someone. Blake's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Maya. Not the Maya he remembered. The nervous maid in a cheap uniform, eyes downcast as she dusted his bookshelves, but a transformed version that seemed impossible. This Maya commanded the room effortlessly, her voice carrying with practiced authority as she discussed technical specifications with her team. "Ms. Johnson," the event director said, loud enough for Blake to overhear, "the governor will arrive in 15 minutes for your private meeting before the keynote." Maya turned slightly, her gaze sweeping the room in a practiced scan. When her eyes met Blake's, there was a brief, almost imperceptible pause, acknowledgement without surprise. She'd known he would be here. Unlike his shocked paralysis, Her reaction was merely a slight stiffening of her shoulders before she continued her conversation without missing a beat. The casual dismissal hit Blake like a physical blow. He had been reduced to background noise in the orbit of a woman he'd once considered disposable. The lounge door opened again, and Blake's breath caught in his throat. Two boys entered, engaged in animated conversation about quantum entanglement, their vocabulary shockingly advanced for children their age. One gestured expansively while explaining a complex concept, the movement so familiar it sent a chill down Blake's spine. "Elijah, Ethan," Maya called, her voice softening. "Come meet Dr. Reynolds from MIT." The boys turned simultaneously, their profiles in perfect alignment momentarily. Blake felt the coffee cup slip from his suddenly numb fingers. The distinctive green eyes, Morrison eyes, his mother always called them, traceable through 5 generations, stared out from faces that echoed his own childhood photographs with uncanny precision. The crash of his cup hitting the floor drew attention. Maya glanced over, her expression unreadable as she registered his stunned realization. With deliberate calm, she turned back to her sons, placing a protective hand on each boy's shoulder. 2 hours later, the grand ballroom was filled beyond capacity. Maya stood confidently at center stage, laser pointer directing attention to projection screens displaying Johnson Renewable's revolutionary battery technology. Blake sat in the third row, unable to focus on her technical explanations as his mind raced through calculations and implications. 10 years. Twin boys with his eyes, his jawline, even his gestures. The timing aligned perfectly with Maya's abrupt departure from the Morrison household. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. These weren't just any prodigies. They were his sons. Sons he had never known existed. Sons his mother had assured him were taken care of when he'd asked about Maya's pregnancy all those years ago. "Our technology has now been implemented across 3 continents," Maya continued, her voice steady and assured. "Johnson Renewables currently employs over 3,200 people and has secured government contracts totaling $1.2 billion. The audience murmured appreciatively as she displayed a graph showing the company's meteoric rise. In the third row, Blake felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's perfect temperature control. Each achievement she listed was a silent rebuke to his dismissal 10 years ago. Each milestone represented what he had discarded as worthless. "Our market capitalization surpassed $3 billion last quarter," Maya announced, making us the fastest-growing clean energy company in history. The statement was delivered without hubris, a simple fact presented by someone accustomed to extraordinary accomplishment. Blake found himself mentally comparing this figure to Morrison Technologies' steadily declining valuation, now hovering around $800 million. The company his father had built, that Blake had been so confident of expanding, was worth barely a quarter of what Maya had created from nothing. When the presentation concluded, thunderous applause filled the ballroom. Maya opened the floor for questions, and a line quickly formed at the microphones placed throughout the aisles. Blake rose on unsteady legs and made his way to the center aisle microphone, heart pounding against his ribs. When his turn came, Blake leaned toward the microphone, aware that cameras were capturing this moment from multiple angles. "Maya Johnson," he began, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "Impressive trajectory. I'd like to know how you balance your professional life with your personal one, especially as a single mother." A ripple of tension moved through the audience. Those unfamiliar with their shared history sensed the pointed nature of the question without understanding its subtext. Those close enough to see Maya's face noticed the momentary flash in her eyes, not fear or anxiety, but something calculating and controlled. She regarded him directly, her expression perfectly composed. "Interesting that you mention that, Mr. Morrison. Motherhood has taught me valuable lessons about choices and consequences." She paused deliberately, the silence magnifying her next words. "When someone rejects responsibilities because they believe certain people don't belong in their world, they often discover the world moves forward quite well without them." Murmurs spread through the audience. Most didn't understand the exchange's deeper meaning, but everyone felt the unmistakable current of tension. My sons, incidentally, are present today. Elijah and Ethan, please stand. The twins rose from their front row seats, confused by the sudden spotlight but complying with poise. These brilliant young men have just received invitations to Stanford's advanced program at 10 years old. We've built our lives without needing anyone who considered us. What was the expression? She tilted her head thoughtfully. Ah, yes. Too boring to build a legacy with. Blake's face drained of color. In the audience's last row, Eleanor Morrison, who had come to support Boston's premier business event, stared in shock at the boys standing proudly beside Maya. Her hand instinctively moved to her chest as she recognized the unmistakable Morrison features in their young faces. The distinctive eyes that had marked her family line for generations, the characteristic set of the jaw, the familiar tilt of the head. While the auditorium erupted in applause, no one noticed Eleanor Morrison in the last row, her face paling as she recognized in the prodigiously intelligent young men on stage the same green eyes that had run in her family for generations, a legacy she had helped deny and that now returned to haunt her. While the auditorium erupted in applause, no one noticed Eleanor Morrison in the last row, her face paling as she recognized in the prodigiously intelligent young men on stage the same green eyes that had run in her family for generations, a legacy she had helped deny and that now returned to haunt her. The aftermath of Maya's keynote unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance of consequences. The grand ballroom transformed into a reception area where technology executives and investors who had once clustered around Blake now orbited Maya, gravitating toward the undeniable center of innovation and success. Her team formed a protective barrier, screening those who approached while Blake stood at the periphery, a glass of untouched champagne trembling slightly in his hand. Eleanor Morrison remained frozen in her seat long after most attendees had moved to the reception. When she finally rose, her normally imperious posture had diminished, shoulders slightly curved as if bearing an invisible weight. She moved purposefully toward the twins, who were enthusiastically explaining a technical concept to an admiring MIT professor. "Excuse me," Eleanor's voice wavered uncharacteristically as she approached the boys. "I wonder if I might—" Two security personnel materialized beside her, their movements smooth but unmistakably definitive. "I'm sorry, ma'am," one said quietly. "Ms. Johnson's family is not available for unscheduled introductions." Eleanor's gaze moved past them to Maya, who had noticed the interaction and given a nearly imperceptible headshake to her security team. Their eyes met across the crowded space. The woman who had handed over an envelope of cash and escorted a pregnant girl from her home, and the woman that girl had become. "Tell her," Eleanor began, but seemed unable to complete the thought, whatever plea or justification dying on her lips before it could take form. The Wall Street Journal's technology correspondent captured the moment on her phone, her trained eye recognizing the tension without understanding its source. By morning, her article would occupy the publication's front page. CEO of Johnson Renewables confronts ex-executive who abandoned her pregnant, Maya Johnson's untold story. The piece would be maddeningly light on specifics but devastating in its implications. At the Four Seasons Hotel later that evening, Maya sat with her executive team in a private dining room, reviewing the day's events with clinical precision. "The announcement of our East Coast Research Center received excellent coverage," her PR director noted. "Early stock indicators suggest we'll open up at least 4 points tomorrow." Maya nodded, her focus momentarily shifting to the twins, who sat at the far end of the table with their tutor, absorbed in advanced calculus problems that would challenge graduate students. A discreet knock interrupted their discussion. "Ms. Johnson?" The hotel manager appeared, looking uncomfortable. "I apologize for the intrusion, but Mr. Blake Morrison is in the lobby, insisting on speaking with you. He's become rather persistent." Maya exchanged glances with Samantha, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. "Tell him I'll meet him in the hotel bar in 15 minutes, Maya decided. "No more than 10 minutes of my time." "Should I come with you?" Samantha asked when the manager departed. "No," Maya replied, straightening her jacket. "This conversation is 10 years overdue." The hotel bar was deliberately selected for its public nature. No private confrontations, no opportunities for unwitnessed exchanges. Blake sat at a corner table, a tumbler of amber liquid before him, his fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the polished wood. When Maya approached, he stood abruptly, nearly toppling his drink. "Maya," her name emerged as a hoarse whisper. Up close, the decade's toll on him was more evident. Stress lines around his mouth, the diminished confidence in his posture, eyes that held more questions than authority. "You have 10 minutes, Blake," Maya said, remaining standing. "Use them wisely." "Those boys," he began, struggling to organize his thoughts. They're mine, aren't they?" "Biologically?" Maya's voice was cool and controlled. "Yes. In every other way that matters? No. You made that abundantly clear when you offered me $10,000 to solve the problem." Blake sank back into his chair, running a hand through his graying hair. "I didn't know they were twins. My mother told me you had taken care of it." "The it you're referring to is currently solving differential equations that would challenge your company's senior engineers," Maya replied. "I didn't take care of anything except my children, without any help from the man who considered them an inconvenience to his career trajectory." Blake pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, placing it on the table with unsteady hands. "I brought gifts for them. I want to meet them properly, to be part of their lives." "Now that you've discovered their prodigies?" Maya asked, making no move to touch the box. "Or now that my company is worth 4 times what yours is? Which part suddenly makes them worthy of your attention?" The barb struck its target precisely. Blake flinched, his eyes dropping momentarily before he rallied. "I was young and stupid. I made a terrible mistake." "You didn't make a mistake, Blake. You made a choice." Maya's voice remained measured, betraying none of the emotion roiling beneath her composed exterior. "A deliberate, calculated choice to discard people you deemed insufficiently valuable to your life plan." "I can make it right," he insisted, leaning forward. "Financial support, educational trusts." "My son's educational funds are already secured through their doctoral degrees," Maya interrupted. "Their mother built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing. Your contribution is a decade too late." "There's a grave," Blake said suddenly, desperation edging into his voice. "At Mount Auburn Cemetery. My mother arranged it all. She told me you had terminated the pregnancy but wanted compensation for emotional distress. I've left flowers there for years, believing—" "I know about the grave," Maya cut him off, her composure finally showing the smallest crack. "I discovered it accidentally while working as a night cleaner at an office building nearby. I've visited that empty grave multiple times over the years." Her eyes hardened. "I watched you leave flowers for children you believed dead, while the real ones grew up without your name or support." The full weight of this revelation seemed to physically impact Blake, his shoulders slumping as the elaborate fiction his mother had constructed crumbled completely. "Maya, please." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Let me meet them. Just once." Before she could respond, movement near the bar entrance caught her attention. The twins stood watching, their expressions unnervingly mature and assessing. Maya realized they must have followed her, their curiosity finally overcoming their usual obedience. "Mom?" Elijah called, both boys approaching cautiously. Maya extended her hands toward them, creating a physical barrier between her sons and their biological father. "Elijah, Ethan, you should be upstairs with Dr. Ramos." "We wanted to see him," Ethan said quietly, his perceptive gaze moving between the adults. "We figured it out." Blake stared at the boys, drinking in features that mirrored his own with breathtaking clarity. "Hello," he managed, voice cracking slightly. The twins regarded him with identical expressions of analytical detachment, as if he were a particularly complex equation requiring solution. "You're Blake Morrison," Elijah stated factually. "You made our mom cry." The simple accusation, delivered without childish emotion but as established fact, seemed to wound Blake more deeply than Maya's controlled anger had. "I made terrible mistakes," Blake admitted, addressing the boys directly. "Mistakes I very much regret." "We heard what you said to her," Ethan replied, his young voice steady, "that she wasn't good enough for your world." "That was wrong of me," Blake said desperately. "I was wrong about everything." "Yes, you were," Elijah agreed with the ruthless honesty of childhood. "Mom's world is better than yours now. Everyone wants to be in it." Ethan nodded solemnly. "We don't need a father who only wants us because we're valuable now." The devastating assessment from a 10-year-old boy struck Blake silent. These children who shared his DNA had clearly inherited more than his green eyes and analytical mind. They possessed an emotional intelligence and moral clarity that seemed to have bypassed him entirely. Maya placed her hands gently on her son's shoulders. "It's time to go upstairs. Say goodnight." Both boys nodded in unison. "Good night, Mr. Morrison," they said together, formal and distant. As Maya guided the twins away, Blake called after her, "This isn't over, Maya. They're my sons too." She paused, turning back with quiet dignity. "You rejected that claim 10 years ago when you called them a problem to be solved. Some decisions can't be undone, Blake, no matter how much money or power you think you have." Later that night in their hotel suite, Maya found the twins still awake, sitting cross-legged on one of the beds, engaged in their characteristic silent communication that sometimes preceded important questions. "Are you angry we followed you?" Elijah asked finally. Maya sat beside them, choosing honesty over protection. "No. You're old enough to understand parts of this situation. I just wanted to shield you from potential pain." "He seems sad," Ethan observed thoughtfully. "He's sad about what he lost," Maya clarified. "That's different from being sad about hurting us." The twins considered this distinction with the careful analysis they applied to complex theories. "Will we have to see him again?" Elijah asked. "Not if you don't want to," Maya promised. "Those decisions belong to you now." As Blake exited the hotel, a notification chimed on Maya's phone. Morrison Technologies board had called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership concerns, and market analysts were already predicting significant stock volatility at tomorrow's opening bell. On the horizon loomed not just the continued fall of Blake Morrison, but potentially the opportunity for an acquisition that would close the 10-year circle in the most unexpected and poetic manner possible. As Blake exited the hotel, Maya felt an unexpected lightness, as if a decade of unspoken words had finally found release. Morning sunlight filtered through the hotel windows as she gently shook the twins awake. Today they would visit Mount Auburn Cemetery, a pilgrimage she had planned since learning of their return to Boston. "Why are we going to a cemetery?" Elijah yawned, pulling on his jacket while Ethan meticulously tied his shoelaces. "There's something there I need you to understand," Maya replied, her voice gentle but resolute. The cemetery welcomed them with autumn's golden light filtering through ancient maples. Maya guided the twins along familiar paths, past grand mausoleums and weathered headstones until they reached the small, simple marker set apart from the Morrison family plot. The modest stone bore the inscription that had haunted her for a decade, "Baby Morrison," with their birth date etched beneath. Elijah squinted at the dates. "That's our birthday." "Yes," Maya confirmed, kneeling between them on the damp grass. "This is the grave your grandmother created to hide your existence." Ethan reached out, tracing the carved letters with curious fingers. "But we're not dead. We're here." "Exactly." Maya placed an arm around each boy. "This empty grave represents the choice your father and his family made, to pretend you never existed rather than acknowledge you didn't fit their plans." "Why did you keep this secret, Mom?" Elijah's piercing gaze held more understanding than a 10-year-old should possess. Maya gathered her thoughts, choosing truth over comfortable fiction. "Not from shame or anger," she assured them, pulling them close, "but because I wanted you to grow up knowing your value doesn't depend on anyone's approval. You aren't defined by his rejection, but by the love we've built together." The twins absorbed this with the thoughtful silence that characterized their most profound moments of understanding. Around them, the cemetery continued its quiet testimony to lives remembered and forgotten. "They mourned something that never existed," Ethan observed, his analytical mind grasping the peculiar tragedy of the empty grave. "While missing something real and amazing?" "Their loss," Elijah concluded with the simple clarity of childhood, echoing his words from their hotel room discussion. Maya nodded, unexpected tears threatening. "The greatest loss imaginable." Back at their hotel, news alerts flashed across Maya's phone. Morrison Technologies stock plummets amid leadership concerns, and Blake Morrison faces board revolt following TechBridge revelations. The business world had transformed their personal confrontation into a corporate earthquake, with Morrison Tech shareholders questioning the character of a man who had abandoned his children and subsequently lied about their existence. "Ms. Johnson, this just arrived by courier." Her assistant handed over a cream-colored envelope bearing the Morrison family crest. Inside, Maya found a handwritten letter from Blake. The expensive stationery couldn't disguise the desperate tone of his words. "Maya, I'm begging for a chance to know my sons. I understand your anger, but please don't punish them for my mistakes. I've established educational trusts in their names and am prepared to provide whatever support they need. 10 years late, but sincere. Please contact my attorney to discuss arrangements." Maya placed the letter aside without response. Blake still didn't understand. This wasn't about money or support. It was about recognizing human worth beyond utility or convenience, a concept that seemed perpetually beyond his grasp. The following day brought another envelope, this one addressed in shaky handwriting that Maya recognized from formal invitations to Morrison family events she had once helped mail. Inside was a brief note from Eleanor Morrison. "I made a terrible mistake helping my son abandon you. Seeing my grandsons from afar was the greatest shock and joy of my life. I don't ask forgiveness, only a chance to know them before it's too late. Whatever conditions you set, I will accept without question." Maya studied the elegant handwriting, evidence of a woman whose iron control had finally fractured. The twins read the letter over her shoulder, their extraordinary comprehension extending to the complex emotional subtext. "Do you think we should meet her?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully neutral. "That's not my decision alone," Maya answered. "How do you feel about it?" The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Elijah spoke. "We're curious, but we don't want anyone who makes you sad." "Your grandmother is part of your heritage," Maya acknowledged. "If you wish to know her, we can arrange it, on our terms, not hers." Meanwhile, Maya stood beside her sons at Stanford University, cutting the ribbon on the Johnson Center for Sustainable Technology, a $20 million research facility dedicated to nurturing the next generation of energy innovations. The twins, now 11 and increasingly confident in public settings, answered reporters' questions about their contributions to the center's design with articulate precision that belied their age. "Ms. Johnson, would you comment on reports that Johnson Renewables is considering bidding on Morrison Technologies' patent portfolio?" a financial reporter called out during the press conference. Maya's smile remained professional. "Johnson Renewables evaluates all opportunities that align with our mission of advancing sustainable energy solutions. Beyond that, I cannot comment on specific acquisition strategies." The following month, Maya received notification that Johnson Renewables' bid for key Morrison Tech assets had been accepted by the bankruptcy court. The irony wasn't lost on her. The company built by the family that had deemed her too ordinary to join their world now belonged to her. Poetic justice, Samantha remarked when the papers were signed. Not justice, Maya corrected. Evolution. Their approach couldn't adapt to changing realities. Ours could. 1 year after the Tech Bridge confrontation, Maya stood before the wrought iron gates of the Morrison mansion in Beacon Hill. The once imposing estate had been sold during bankruptcy proceedings, its contents auctioned to settle debts. Maya had purchased it through a separate foundation, purposefully detached from Johnson Renewables. Workers streamed in and out, renovating the space according to precise specifications. The library where Blake had once offered her a check to solve her problem was being transformed into a computer lab. The West Wing, where their ill-fated relationship had unfolded, now housed dormitories for young mothers pursuing technical education. A discreet brass plaque beside the entrance read, "Renaissance Foundation for Women in Technology." Beneath it, smaller lettering, "Every woman deserves the chance to build her own legacy." On a sunny afternoon in Boston Common, the twins sat across from Eleanor Morrison on a park bench. Maya observed from a respectful distance, close enough to intervene if needed, but allowing them space for this carefully arranged meeting. Eleanor's once regal posture had diminished with age and regret, but her eyes, the same distinctive green she had passed to her son and grandsons, remained sharp and alert. "You look just like your father at your age," Eleanor said, her voice wavering slightly. "He was brilliant too." "Our mother says intelligence is valuable only when paired with compassion," Ethan replied, neither accepting nor rejecting the comparison. Eleanor nodded, blinking rapidly. "Your mother is wiser than I ever was." From her position several yards away, Maya watched this tentative connection form. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. The twins maintained the emotional boundaries she had taught them, engaging with curiosity rather than need or attachment. At the edge of the park, a solitary figure observed the scene from a distance. Blake Morrison, no longer the confident CEO but a man visibly weathered by consequence, watched his mother interact with sons he would never truly know. When his gaze met Maya's across the distance, he offered a slight nod, acknowledgement perhaps of a battle conclusively lost. That evening in her Boston hotel suite, Maya reviewed the final plans for the foundation headquarters at the former Morrison mansion. Beside her desk sat a framed photograph of the twins as newborns, juxtaposed with the framed Wall Street Journal headline, "Johnson Renewables acquires Morrison Tech in bankruptcy auction." 10 years after being expelled through the back entrance of the Morrison mansion with only $10,000 and 2 lives growing inside her, Maya Johnson opened the main doors of the same building as its new owner, proving that the true legacy isn't built by rejecting people for being too ordinary, but by recognizing that the extraordinary often comes from the most unexpected places, and that empty graves sometimes contain the seeds of the brightest future anyone could imagine. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.